All right, ladies and gents, welcome back. Hopefully everybody is still with us here this morning. All right, welcome again to those of you who just joined. So let's jump right in. All right. As you can see, if you were able to see my screen share, a little bit of what we're doing today. All right. Like I said, we're talking about point of view because that's what we're going to be focusing on when we do the first checkpoint, which we're going to start Friday, and something that's super important in this project as a whole, right? So we're going to be able to try to, as you can see, understand and analyze the different points of view in a story and their effect on that story as well, okay? So to get started, here is our do now for today. This is what I want you to think about looking at this picture right here, okay? What type of point of view is represented here, do we think? Is it first person, second person, or third person, right? So any of our video gamers like Tyseem should be able to answer this fairly quickly. Anybody else who's familiar with what the different points of view are should also be able to answer this fairly quickly. But go ahead and respond in the chat. You can just put A, B, or C. All right. But what type of point of view do we have represented in this picture? All right. I'll give you guys like a minute or two to respond. All right, what do we think? I'm gonna check the chat, see if we have anything coming in. All right, we got a couple answers. We got one from Tyquil, one from Ashley. They both said first person. Excellent. All right, we had a good bit of people this morning, so I'm going to give you guys one more minute. I want to see at least two more responses from different people in the chat for this. Okay. Again, what type of point of view is represented here? First person, second person, or third person? Please tell me in the chat. I'll give you guys another minute. Like I said, let's see if we can get at least two more responses in there from any from people we haven't that haven't responded yet. Check the chat here again, see if we got anything new. Good, we got one from Darian as well. Awesome, thank you. You all said first person, and you were all correct. All right. But what I want somebody to tell me now, either in the chat or you can come off mute, is how did you know that this was first person? What gave it away that our point of view here is first person?
Mr. Todd, can you make the picture bigger?
I sure can. I'll zoom in a little bit here. Ba-ba-ba. Oh, why am I going? There we go. All right. So hopefully it's a little bit easier to see. But a couple different people said that we have first person point of view represented here, which is correct. But now what I want to know is, how do you know that it is first person? What gives it away that this is first person point of view? When you say you're playing the game, Tycho, can you be more specific? Like, you've played this game before, so you know it's first person, or do you mean that like it looks like it's actually you playing the game? What do you mean? It's from there. Oh, I see what you're saying now. Yeah. Salim said it's from their perspective. They're being the person holding the gun. Salim, is that who you mean? Yeah, exactly. And I think to Tyquil's point, that person is meant to be you. So you're seeing this. So like this picture is shot from the perspective, to use Selena's word, which is a good word to use when we're talking about point of view. It's shot from the perspective of the person holding the gun. So it's made to look as if like you yourself playing the game are actually in there doing it. That's how we know it's first person, because it's from that that person's perspective. Really good job. Okay, and that is what we are going to talk about today. All right. Let me find my other PowerPoint here. Is point of view. All right. Because like I said, point of view is something we're going to focus on for our next checkpoint. Is very crucial in this story that we're reading, Homegoing, for those of you that have been here, and always good to review. All right. So like I said, as we're going through these, I don't have a note taker for you guys today, but you can take screenshots if you want. The recording will also be up on the SPL YouTube page later today, so you can always check back there as well if you want to jot stuff down on your own. That is fine too. Okay. But to dive in here, all right, what is point of view? Point of view is the angle of considering things, which shows us the opinion or feelings of the individuals involved in a situation. In literature, point of view is the mode of narration that an author employs to let the readers hear and see what takes place in a story, poem, or essay. So, just like from that picture, it's taken from the perspective that we're able to hear and see as if we're actually the one, in the game holding the rifle. First person, point of view when it comes to literature, like it says, is the story is told from a certain perspective, so we're able to hear and see, what takes place. Oh, excuse me, from that specific angle, that specific perspective. All right. There are three major types or perspectives of point of view, which we already know because we addressed in the do now. We have first person, second person, and third person. All right. The biggest things we want to look for when we are trying to identify a point of view are going to be our pronouns, right? So that you can see we have some examples here already. Like in first person, you would see I, me, myself, we. This is just like our picture. This is where it's told from, the main character's perspective, from one character's perspective. All right. I heard the door slam. I'm telling you my story. Second person, which is not very common in literature at least, this would be the pronoun you. Okay, so an example for this would be if I was talking to somebody and we were trying to remember what happened the previous night, and we said, "Don't you remember? Like, we came home and so and so happened, and then you heard the door slam." That would be in now. I'd be telling the story in second person, right? Because I'm narrating to that person what they experienced. Right? And then one of the other most common ones we see is third person. This is where we have pronouns like she, he, they, or it. So, example, I would say, Lupe heard. Oh my goodness, excuse me. Lupe heard the door slam. All right. So our most common ones again are going to be first person and third person in pretty much all of the stories that we read. So before I put up an example here, I want to know: can any of you think of off the top of your head stories that are told in first person or third person point of view? Right. Let's start with just first person. Okay. Do any of you know or can think of any stories that you've read, could also be movies that you've seen, that were told from first person point of view? You can tell me in the chat. You can come off mute real quick if you want. But any examples that anybody can think of off the top of their head that are in first person? Slima said the Lemon Brown story. I'm not familiar with that one, Slima, but I will take your word for it. Can you give us any quick little details about it?
It was just about this little boy, and I forgot what happened, but it was like a story around his neighborhood that this old man named Lemon Brown had like a treasure, and like these people was trying to rob him or whatever.
Okay.
But the treasure was just like I think something from his wife who passed away.
And how did you know that it was in first person?
Cause the boy, like the little boy who the little boy was telling the story.
Okay, gotcha. So he's telling his own story. So we're seeing pronouns like I, we. Awesome. Good job. Anybody else with a different example that comes to mind that's told in first person? If you had me for class last year, uh, during the second term last year, we read a book that is also a very popular movie that you should remember that is also told in first person. If anybody remembers the book I'm thinking of. Any other examples that come to mind that are told in first person? All right, what about Hunger Games, right? That was the one I was trying to hint at, that if you had me last year, you might remember, right? Hunger Games is told from, in the book at least, told from Katniss's perspective. She's telling the story. So that would also be first person. She's telling you everything that happens, okay? How about third person examples? Anybody that can think of a story, a book, or even a movie that they know that is told from the third person point of view off the top of your head before we look at some specifics? How about third person? Any stories, any books, movies that come to mind from anyone? All right. Salim has been crushing it. Is there anybody else who we haven't heard from in a little bit, that has any thoughts? Any examples of third person books or stories that we know off the top of our head? You can put them in the chat. You can come off mute real quick and tell me. No, no, we're stumped on remembering third person books or stories. How about a hint? Are there any Harry Potter fans out there this morning? If so, is Harry Potter told from the third person? Maybe. What do we think? Selena says yes, and I do agree. All right. So that would be a good example of third person. Now we're going to dive into third person now, because there are several different kinds of third person narratives that we can have. All right. There's two kinds of, specifically two kinds that I'm thinking of. Third person narration. Is anybody familiar with them? Can anybody think of one of them that you've heard of before, that you remember learning about before? When we talk about third person, there's at least two different kinds that we want to talk about. Can anybody think of or remember one of them off the top of their head? Anything come to mind right now? Again, you can tell me in the chat. You can come off mute. We got a good crowd today, so I should be hearing from more than just one person, at least. So, anything come to mind when I talk about two different kinds of third person? Anything that we remember that we've heard before? And if not, that's okay, because that's what we're going to talk about right now. Just checking the chat one more time. All right. If we're stumped, that's okay, because that's what we are going to move on to next. All right. The first one is third person omniscient. All right. So, third person omniscient is a point of view presented from the perspective of an all knowing narrator. Right. This narrator knows what the characters, he, she, they, it, are doing, as well as what they are thinking and feeling. So, this is the most common type of third person narration that we have. Okay. So, here is an example of third person omniscient in this example from the Lord of the Rings over here. It says, a few creatures came and looked at them when the fire had died away. A fox passing through the wood on business of his own stopped several minutes and sniffed. Hobbits, he thought. Well, what next? I have heard of strange doings in this land, but I have seldom heard of a hobbit sleeping out of doors under a tree. 3 of them. There's something mighty queer behind this. He was quite right, but he never found out any more about it. Right? So that'd be our example of a third person omniscient narration. So if we look at our definition over here again, right? Third person omniscient point of view is from an all-knowing narrator. This narrator knows what the characters are doing as well as what they are thinking and feeling, right? So if that's our definition, what are the things in this example that tell us it's third person omniscient? What are some of the key things we can pick up on that let us know, okay, yeah, this is a third person omniscient narrator? Any thoughts? If y'all want to come off mute to answer this question, if you can, that'd be the best way since I can't see the chat right now while I'm sharing my screen.
When it say a few creatures came and looked at them.
Okay, right. We have the right pronouns, right? So we know it's third person. So the pronoun tells us it's third person. What tells us that it's third person omniscient, all right? And again, keep in mind what our definition is over here. This narrator knows what the characters are doing as well as what they are thinking and feeling. Right? So, do we have any of that in our example over here? Do we know what the fox is thinking and feeling? Or feeling, I should say.
He thought something was off or like weird.
Yeah, he does. And we're told that, right? So we do know what he thinks and feels. And because it tells us right here, it says hobbits, he thought. So that tells us we already know what he's thinking. And then they tell us what that thought is. And that, there's something right here with this. He was quite right, but he never found out any more about it. And so not only are we told what he thought, we also are then told, what happens next. So those are the things that give away the fact that, okay, this narrator is third person omniscient. They know everything that's happening, and they are able to tell us what each character is thinking, what they're feeling, what happens to that character, what's that character doing, what are their actions, right? And as we pointed out as well, we have correct pronouns in here too. Okay. The other kind of third person narration we have is third person limited omniscient, or often it's just called third person limited, right? So the limited point of view is presented from the perspective of an all-knowing narrator. So we have all-knowing again, right? Who knows about only a few characters rather than all characters in a narrative. The narrator knows what the few select characters, he, she, they, it, are doing, as well as what they are thinking and feeling. Okay, so the difference here is what? In third person omniscient, we have somebody who knows every character's thoughts and feelings, everything that's going on. Third person limited, we only know that for a few select characters. So for our Harry Potter fans that we mentioned earlier, here's an example from Chamber Secrets. All right. So when we read these examples, see if you can figure out who the select characters are that we know all the thoughts and feelings of. So who are what is our limit in this limited omniscient narration? Okay. Harry had taken up his place at wizard school, where he and his scar were famous, but now the school year was over, and he was back with the Dursleys for the summer, back to being treated like a dog that had rolled in something smelly. The Dursleys hadn't even remembered that today happened to be Harry's birthday, Harry's 12th birthday. Of course, his hopes hadn't been high. So, from that example, if this is third person limited, and we know that in third person limited, we only know the thoughts and feelings of certain characters, who's the character in this example that we know the thoughts and feelings of? Again, tell me in the chat is fine. Come on, mute is fine. All right. I'd like to hear from somebody we haven't heard from in a minute. If the rest of us are out there listening. But what do we think for this one? Who is the character that we know all the thoughts and feelings of in this example? Because we know in third person limited, we only know thoughts and feelings of a select few characters, not everybody. So in this example, which character does the narrator know the thoughts and feelings of? I'll read it one more time. Harry had taken up his place at wizard school, where he and his scar were famous. But now the school year was over, and he was back with the Dursleys for the summer. Back to being treated like a dog that had rolled in something smelly. The Dursleys hadn't even remembered that today happened to be Harry's 12th birthday. Of course, his hopes hadn't been high. So again, who is the character in this example that we know all the thoughts and feelings of? Who can help me out with this question? Either in the chat or coming off mute. But whose thoughts and feelings do we know here in this example? Is it Harry's or is it the Dursleys? What do you think? What do we think in this example right here? Whose thoughts and feelings do we know? Does the narrator know? Harry's or the Dursleys? It's got to be one of them because that's what third person limited means. That we know all the thoughts and feelings of a select few characters. So in this case, which character do we know the thoughts and feelings of? Do we know Harry's thoughts and feelings, or do we know the Dursleys' thoughts and feelings? What do we think for this example? Are we still out there? Are we still alive? Have I lost all of you wonderful people this morning? Do we need more coffee? What's happening? Anyone? Any thoughts? We got a good bit of people in here. I know we should have at least somebody who can help me out here. I know we got one or two Harry Potter fans out there this morning in our group. I'll put it in the chat too in case you are having trouble hearing me. Which characters' thoughts and feelings does the narrator know about in this example? Okay. And I'll put it up there one more time, full screen, so we can see. All right. And again, remember what we're talking about here is third person limited, which is a type of point of view where we have an all-knowing narrator, but they only know the thoughts and feelings about a few select characters. So who is the character in this example that we know all the thoughts and feelings of? And I'll read it one more time. Harry had taken up his place at wizard school, where he and his scar were famous. But now the school year was over, and he was back with the Dursleys for the summer, back to being treated like a dog that had rolled in something smelly. The Dursleys hadn't even remembered that today happened to be Harry's 12th birthday. Of course, his hopes had been high. So, which character does the narrator know all the thoughts and feelings for? And which character do we not? Does the narrator know all of Harry's thoughts and feelings? Or does the narrator know all of the Dursleys' thoughts and feelings in this example? What do we think? Anybody out there who can help me out with this one? Just a gentle reminder, ladies and gents, about that all-important attendance grade, part of which includes participation. So, the more we participate, better it is, not just for me, but for you guys as well. Any thoughts on which character we know the thoughts and feelings of in this example right here? All right, if we are stumped on this, that's fine. But if you can see down here at the bottom, it tells us that once this goes away, all right, the omniscient narrator knows about Harry's thoughts and feelings, but not the Dursleys. And we can tell that by this part right here, where they tell us the Dursleys hadn't even remembered that today happened to be Harry's birthday. Okay. And of course, his hopes hadn't been high. So we know what his hopes are. We know how he feels. A third person omniscient. So like the first example, if it was third person omniscient, we would know both of them. We would know that like the Dursleys knew it was his birthday, but they didn't care anyway, or something like that. But instead, we're told that they don't remember, so we don't know, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. Okay, that is the difference here. When we want to analyze and describe a point of view, like we're going to do in checkpoint 1 on Friday, right? It's important to consider the text as a whole, meaning like think about the whole story itself, not just that one part, right? Including the thesis or main idea, the audience, the author, and the characters involved. And here are some questions we can ask ourselves, and I'll be putting these back up throughout as we kind of analyze the point of view in our story. Who's the speaker, who's the audience, what type of source is this, so on and so forth. And then you can see some other ones. How is the point of view in this source different from the point of view of others? And does it have any limitations, like this example we looked at here? Oh, excuse me again. All right. So here's the question that I want to wrap up with today, ladies and gents. Hopefully I get some responses to this one, since I had some crickets for the last question, but I'll put this in the chat as well. So now that we know a little bit about the different points of view, okay, I'm going to put this last question in the chat. What point of view is our story that we're reading, Homegoing, told from? So what do we think? Anybody with any thoughts as we kind of wrap up here today? It is third person. Yes, Tyquil. Can you tell me which type of third person? I'm glad that we still have some life out there. It's good to hear from somebody. So yes, it's third person. Can we tell me, is it third person limited or third person omniscient? Do we know the difference? Or can we take a guess? Anybody? Limited. Why do we think limited, Tyquil? Tyquil says third person limited. I just guess. So do we agree? Do we think that our story that we're reading, Homegoing, do we think it's told from third person limited? Or is it third person omniscient? It is third person, but which one is the key? So do we think it's third person limited, like Tyquil said? Do we think it's third person omniscient? Anybody else who has any other thoughts? Salima, any thoughts from you? Ashley, Nikaya, anybody else who might answer? All right, if we're not sure, let's investigate real quick before we wrap up here today. So I'm going to share my screen and put up the PDF copy of the story, right? If we look at this top part right here, we can get a good example of which one it is, right? His name was James Collins, and he was the newly appointed governor of the Cape Coast Castle. Within a week, he had come back to the village to ask Baba for Effie's hand in marriage. Kobe's rage at the proposal filled every room like hot steam. She is all but promised to a bhikkhu, he yelled at Baba when Baba told him that she was considering the offer. So if we look at just that little excerpt at the top there, do we think it's third person omniscient or third person limited? If we know that in omniscient, we know the thoughts and feelings of every character, but in limited, we only know the thoughts and feelings of a select few characters. Um, Remembering what we've already read and know that most of the story is about Effia, okay? If we take this little example at that I've highlighted here, do we think it's third person omniscient or third person limited? What do we think? Let's see if we can figure this out, and then we will wrap up for this morning. So you can tell me in the chat. You can come off mute if you want, but so we know it's third person already because we have pronouns like his, okay? And we already know that we know Effia's thoughts and feelings because she has been our main character so far in this section. So now here we learn about James Collins and we learn his actions, okay? We learn that Kobe is filled with rage, okay? Because James wants to propose to Effia. So if we know all of that about those other characters, not just Effia, which type do we think this is? Third person omniscient or third person limited? What do we think? All I want to see is one answer to help me out here, and then we can wrap up for today. Okay? Do we know the thoughts and feelings of only a few characters, or do we know the thoughts and feelings of every character? Based on this example here, who can help me out to wrap us up today? Anyone out there? Anyone at all? Hey, Naima, Naima, if you're here for second period, we still have a few minutes left. So if you want to jump off and hop back on, that is okay. All right. But my ladies and gents, from first period, this is what we're trying to wrap up with today. So this is the last thing I need from you. I need to hear from you today. All right. Based on this example that I have highlighted, based on everything we've talked about, do we think that our story that we're reading, Homegoing, is it in third person omniscient point of view, or is it in third person limited point of view? Omniscient being we know the thoughts and feelings of everybody, or limited being we only know the thoughts and feelings of a few characters? What do we think? Who can help me out to wrap up here today? Sooner somebody gives me an answer, the sooner we are done. Nobody with any thoughts on this? Slimmy says limited. Yeah, Dinah, no worries. We will get caught up. You can come to the Summit Lab if you want, and I can shoot you an email as well. All right, because I know you might have had your links messed up. All right. So we know it's third person, right? And limited is a good guess, all right? But if we already know that we know. So limited and omniscient, that's what we talked about today, Diana. So I'm not about to repeat my entire lesson. But if you want to watch the YouTube recording later, that's the best place to get caught up. Okay. So we already know it's third person, and we already know how Ethia thinks and feels, because that's what we've been told if you've been here and read the story with us. But now that we know how James thinks and feels and how Kobe thinks and feels, if we know how all those characters think and feel, not just Ethia, is it going to be limited or is it going to be omniscient, third person? What do we think? Remember from our examples that we looked at today in that PowerPoint where we had the Lord of the Rings one where we know how the fox thought and felt, and then we had the Harry Potter one where we only knew how Harry thought and felt, not the Dursleys too. So if we know in the story we're reading that we know everybody's thoughts and feelings, is that going to be omniscient, third person, all knowing, or is it going to be limited third person where we only know a few characters' thoughts and feelings? Anyone with a thought who can wrap us up here today? We got a couple people guess limited. But again, we know limited would mean we only know the thoughts and feelings of a select few characters. But we just learned how Kobe is angry. We've learned what James's intentions are. So if that's the case and it's not limited, it would be what? What's our only other option for a third person point of view? Omniscient, yes, Salima, good job. All right. It's third person omniscient because we know how every character thinks and feels. All right. I apologize that did go a little bit longer today, ladies and gents. But again, remember, these classes will go as quick as you make them go with your continued participation. All right. But thank you, everybody who shared in the community meeting. That was a really good conversation. Thank you to everybody who answered this morning. All right. We will stop there. We will pick up with jumping into checkpoint 1 on Friday. All right. Thank you. Very good job. If you have questions, shoot me an email. Come see me in the Summit Lab. Right. And the recording will be on YouTube later today. All right. Thank you again. And I will see you on Friday. Good job.